It is March 22nd of 2005. I'm going to keep going from page 12. Something about... I know y'all thought I was going to say something about Mary, but I don't. Reading botany papers, because we know how to read, gave me snatch her soul. I gotta stop channeling because I'm just gonna turn off the channel for a moment because I gotta read. I'm gotta read this book. Something about reading botany papers gave me snatches of the feeling, glimpses of a sort of whole I couldn't fully articulate. It literally says that. Glimpses of a sort of whole I couldn't yet fully articulate. I had the sense I was uncovering large gulfs in my knowledge. How long had I spent in the presence of plants while knowing next to nothing about them? I felt a curtain drawing back little by little onto a parallel universe. I knew it was there now, but not yet what it held. I signed up for a fern science class at the New York Botanical Garden. Taught by none other than the Mormon from Sachs expedition. No longer 44, but useful just the same. I would come to learn that the botany world comprises a cast of recurring characters with storylines between them. Some amiable, some not. We learned how to identify ferns, about their basic structure, and about the more idiosyncratic species. A resurrection fern grows on the branches of oak trees and can almost completely dehydrate in times of drought, shrinking down into a dead-looking crisp. It can remain in its dried state for more than 100 years and still fully rehydrate. Tree ferns can grow more than 65 feet tall, and other ferns are minuscule fertilizer factories, like the tiny azolla. And then there's bracken fern, which makes cows who dare to graze it bleed internally to death. Just a totally cruel fern, Moran said. I learned that ferns are much, much older evolutionarily than flowering plants. They appeared on the scene even before evolution dreamed the concept of seeds. They reproduce without them. Days later, during lunch hours spent reading about ferns, falling desperately into true obsession, I heard that this lack of seeds boggled Europeans for centuries. All plants had seeds. It was key to their sexual reproduction, or so medieval people thought. If they couldn't find the fern seeds, contemporary logic followed that they simply must be invisible. And because another dominant theory at the time suggested that the physical characteristics of plants were clues about what could be used for, people believed finding them These seeds, invisible, would grant humans the power of invisibility. Actual fern sex turned out to be much weirder. First of all, they reproduce using spores, not seeds. But here's the kicker: they have swimming sperm. Before they grow into the leafy fronds we all know, they have a completely separate life as a gamophyte fern, a tiny lobed plant, just one cell thick, not remotely recognizable as the fern it will later become. You'd miss them on the forest floors. The male gamophyte fern releases sperm that swim in water collected on the ground after a rain, looking for female gamophyte fern eggs to fertilize. Fern sperm are shaped like tiny corkscrews and are endurance athletes. They can swim for up to 60 minutes. You can watch them squiggle under a microscope. The sperm alone isn't the most amazing thing about fern reproduction. In 2018, in the beginning of my infatuation, research was emerging to suggest that ferns compete with other ferns for resources by emitting a hormone that causes the sperm of the neighboring fern species to slow down. Slower sperm means less of that species survives. So the sabotaging fern can enjoy more of whatever is scarce, be it water, sunlight, or soil. Scientists were just beginning to wrap their heads around the fact that this is brand new, excuse me. Eric Schootpels, a research botanist at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C., told me over the phone. Sabotaging sperm was evidently the cutting edge of fern science. We know it's the plant's hormone, but no idea how it works, he said. How did a fern know it was beside some fern competition? How did it time its malevolent release? Malevolent release. A fern researcher at Colgate University had just presented an earlier paper on the phenomenon at a botany conference that same month. I let that sink in a few minutes. Ferns can remotely interfere with other ferns' sperm. That was incredibly salty plant activity. I began to see where Moran was coming from. This also seemed remarkably brilliant. What else can plants do? With that question in mind, I began to focus my newfound lens on a relatively young area within plant science, plant behavior. The announcements of emerging research, I found, were peppered with plant behavior papers. I was about to say planes, but I guess paper planes are paper airplanes of plant life. I'm not kidding. I don't want to channel right now. With that question in mind, I began to focus my newfound lens on a relatively young area within plant science, plant behavior, the announcements of emerging research I found were peppered with plant behavior papers. This represented, we're going to start from there. This represented a new mental gate for me to walk through, that plants could be thought to behave at all was still an enchanting possibility. Now, for y'all who have been to like an enchanted forest, you can probably tell the plants from the trees by their behavior, right? But several papers I found pushed the farthest edge of that concept farther. They suggested that plants might have a form of intelligence. I was intrigued and skeptical. I wasn't the only one. I'm sorry. I would be remiss if I didn't insert at least some level of bouncy, trouncy, fun. I'm going to go back and we'll read it real slow. I was intrigued and skeptical. I wasn't the only one. As it turned out, the suggestion of plant intelligence had recently started an all-out war. I'd come across this corner of the scientific world at remarkably exciting times. In the last decade and a half, revival of plant behavior research had brought countless new realizations to botany more than 40 years after an irresponsible, best-selling book nearly snuffed out the field for good. The Secret Life of Plants, published in 1973, captured the public imagination on a global scale. Written by Peter Tompkins and Christopher Bird, the book was a mix of real science, flimsy experiments, and unscientific projection. In one chapter, Tompkins and the Bird suggested that plants could feel and hear, and that they preferred Beethoven to rock and roll. In another, a former CIA agent named Cleve Baxter hooked up a polygraph test to his houseplant and imagined that the plant was set on fire. The polygraph needle went wild, which would mean that the plant was experiencing a surge in electrical activity. In humans, a reading like that was believed to denote a surge of stress. The plant, according to Baxter, was responding to his malevolent thoughts. The implication was that there existed not only a sort of plant consciousness, but also plant mind reading. The book was an immediate and meteoric success on the popular market, surprising for a book about plant science. Paramount put out a feature film about it. Stevie Wonder wrote the soundtrack. The first pressings of the album version were sent out scented with floral perfume. To its many astonished readers, the book offered a new way to view the plants all around them, which up until then had seemed ornamental, passive, more akin to the world of rocks than animals. It also aligned with the advent of New Age culture, which was ready to inhale stories about how plants were alive as we were. People began talking to their houseplants and leaving classical music playing for their ficus when they went out. I just want to say there's something called a hibiscus, but it was a beautiful collection of myths. Many scientists tried to reproduce the most tantalizing research the book presented to no avail. Cellular and molecular physiologist Clifford Slayman and plant psychologist Arthur Galston, writing an American Scientist in 1979, called it a corpus of fallacious or unprovable, unprovable, unprobable, unprob, prove, proof. A corpus of fallacious or unprovable claims. It didn't help that former CIA agent Baxter, as well as Marcel Vogel, Goggle, I don't, an IBM researcher who claimed to be able to reproduce the Baxter effect, believed that one had to develop an emotional rapport with the plant before any effect was possible. In their view, that explained away any inability of another lab to replicate the results. Empathy between plant and human is key, Vogel said, and a spiritual development is indispensable. According to botanists working at the time, the damage that secret life caused to the field cannot be overstated. It's actually in italics, the secret life, but I wanted to put some. I'd be itchy for quotations, I suppose. I'll start again and I won't use quotations. According to botanists working at the time, the damage that secret life caused to the field cannot be overstated. The twin gatekeepers of science, funding boards and peer review boards, always conservative institutions, closed the doors. Over the following years, according to several researchers I spoke with, the National Science Foundation became more reluctant to give grants to anybody studying plants responses to their environment. They weren't going to give grants to people who were trying to study plants' responses to their environment. Proposals with so much as a whiff of inquiry into plant behavior were turned down. The money, however, little there had been, dried up. Dried up. Scientists who had pioneered the field changed course or left the sciences altogether. But a select few held on, biding their time with other lines of inquiry, waiting for the tide to turn. In the last decade and a half, it finally has. Funding for some plant behavior research began flowing again through grants that were still hard to come by at first. Botany journals, though much were still edited by opponents of the plant intelligence field, began letting a trickle of these papers through. The changes were likely the result of new technology like genetic sequencing and more advanced microscopes, which made it possible to come to previously outlandish conclusions with real rigor. Or perhaps the political mockery that followed the Secret Life debacle was just far enough in the rearview mirror. Many of the authors didn't use words like intelligence to describe what they found, but the results nonetheless suggested that plants were much more sophisticated than anyone dared to think. I'm going to stop. It's page 16. I'm stopping on page 16. I gotta go grab a deck of cards. I'll just be a moment. So, sadly enough, I could not find an entire deck. But hey, which one of us has a full deck anyway, right? The beautiful thing about tarot is that the general gist of the message will definitely come through whenever you're ready to hear it. Here's a Knight of Pentacles in reverse. Here's the Four of Cups. So now we've got 44, basically. This is a flag. There's a 4. If you want me to read it quite literally, someone is not understanding that the gossip will not wait. No. Plants have had to understand that for years, and so have, well, I don't know, animals. Humans gossip all the time. I can't wait for the part of the book where they tell you how plants oppose themselves, predators, and other higher intelligence humans. Oh, there's the Eight of Wands. Not communicating. Someone's actually not telling somebody how they're not going to communicate. There's no connection there. There's no talking, there's no walking, there's no expanding that. This is not a fringe benefit that is extended to everybody at all, in any sense of the word. Bottom of the deck, you got the sun. So as a light eater, do I need to switch hands? What is it? Do I need to switch hands? There's this fringe benefit of CO2. That's what I'm seeing. CO2. CO2. You're gonna run out of oxygen if what we choose to do is kill the trees. There's this one song by Enya. I know I said I wouldn't channel, but I don't give a much of a damn most of the time. I'm pretty laid back. It's called Memory of Trees. If you've never heard her song, that's like a gift. The gift of her song is most likely just It's an understanding of CO2, oxygen, digestion of chlorophyll. Yeah, it's photosynthesis at its best. And if you want to be a light eater, there's so many cups on the, like the 9 of cups, to be exact, 9. There's a whole bunch of ways in which we express ourselves as human, but also we think that our intelligence is superior. We can't breathe underwater. And when we're fishes out of water, it's kind of like we can't be a tree either, unless you know how to consume, eat, eat light, light eater. Ad litem. Ad litem. Nope. There's a song, Light 'em Up.